hesitate, within seconds, all the students from the back come to the front. Yeah, quickly. My name is Chandra Vikash. I am founder and mentor of Gaia Innovation Labs, along with Atal Innovation Mission and Atal New India Challenge. Is that the present Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, was my classmate in metallurgical engineering. So I had a very tough time. You can imagine, because I'm going to share something very, very important for all of you. Engineering, I wasn't chasing for scholarship in the US, which everyone, including some of my good friends, would advise me to do. I remember that, which is a Russian collaboration township. It's one of the best planned township in the country. So I grew up seeing very beautiful, township that you will find anywhere in the country. I was there for 15 days recently, and I can tell you, it has fallen in many ways because the steel township, steel plant has shrunk. But many other things would make it one of the best cities close to Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune in the coming years. So I also started a Viksit Bharat campaign there. But when I finished my engineering, I made sure that I took a vow. And the vow was that after IITians start coming to say, that is Steel Authority of India Limited, technology would not be imported. So my first startup experience was from within a large public sector company. Because startup is not just about setting up your own business. It is about the spirit of ownership. And irrespective of what institution you work in, whether it's a newly formed company, or whether it is a government, or whether it is a political party, or whether it is a social organization or a large corporate, the spirit of ownership doesn't go away from you. So in that spirit, I took up technology development projects, despite the fact that Indian industry doesn't have an R&D culture. And my BTech project, my specialization was in steel making. So I knew in and out of what was going on in the steel industry worldwide. So I took up two projects which would return the company, more than 1,000 times what they were paying me, or the overall cost that they were incurring on me. One project I'll quickly mention just for illustration was that there is something called LD converter in a steel plant. You tend to spit, you hit it very hard. So it is like, Deepavali, like sparkles, splashes, but you can damage the tip of the water cooled lens, and it can burst, and it can lead to delay time, which can shut down that converter for weeks. If you keep it very high, then it creates what's called sloppiness. So it creates fogging in the slag, and that also deposits the slag particles on the lens. So effectively that also leads to downtime. So I figured out that Nippon Steel had an online dipping temperature which could take the temperature right there, instead of the present practice in which they would take a sample, they would stop the heat. So lots of heat loss is now happening. Imagine a 1700 degrees centigrade molten bath. And they would take a sample, send it through a pneumatic channel to the testing laboratory, and once the chemical composition, etc. was confirmed, then only they would stop the heat and decant the steel into a slab. So this was the practice. Now, by ensuring that there is a coating which is non-sticky, like we see non-sticky cookware. So maybe Teflon, maybe lime, maybe zircon. So what kind of coating would ensure that slag particles do not deposit on the lens? Number one. Number two was, what kind of online temperature dip would ensure that the heat did not be stopped and the heat loss would not occur. And now I went back to RDCIS, which is the R&D wing of SAIL, because it's a very large steel conglomerate. But they had no R&D culture. Now, being from the township, I knew that I would likely run into these hurdles, so I was prepared to write CAD in my second year of my job, and I made sure that I got into IIM Calcutta. So that kind of precision planning I have had from very early on in my career. I'm just sharing this as an example. There's nothing rocket science about it. Every one of you can practice this. It's a formula which never fails. Look further. Plan your career 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in advance. And with that ability, you'll never be in trouble. You'll never be under any kind of stress. So after doing MBA, the spirit continued. So I'm not just yet another IIM. I happen to be one of those rare species who question the institutions from being inside the system, which is not a task many of you can pull off. So what happened is that just like in IIT, where I questioned that why the whole curriculum is not focused on career development, on demand responsiveness, because metallurgical engineering professors are not geared to do demand mapping. That's a completely different skill set. Today we have artificial intelligence, we have chat GPT, we have lots of predictive modeling. Those times India did not have lots of predictive modeling. So the professor said that while we hugely respect you for bringing out this fact, and I even said in my farewell address at IIT, which I believe is a historical statement. So while people like Sundar Pichai and Sharmistha Dubey, who's another billionaire, one of my classmates, she incidentally was president of Match Incorporated till recently, the company which runs Tinder, the singles dating website. So very diverse portfolio that we have as a batch. So I told in my farewell address that you have reduced IITs to a farewell vending machine, to a scholarship vending machine, because it was written on the masthead, and this is something that today every Indian patriot should know. It was written on the masthead, it was said, dedicated to the service of the nation. And sir, the joke on the campus was, which nation? To my young, impressionable mind, this was anti-national. We were breeding anti-nationals at IITs. We have sent them off at our taxpayer contribution to the United States, from where they are pressurizing to keep the dollar inflated and keep the rupee down. So, while Pravash was sharing about very brutal facts that only 1% of Indian startups see the third year, that's a national shame. And MERI College, love for all his niceties of Lexita, and I know him for nearly a year now, and I believe I have very good rapport with people at MERI College, so I can get away with saying what I'm going to tell you. 1% success rate for any country is a national shame. We should be ashamed, the entire startup ecosystem, Startup India, and especially IPSI, who did a lip reading service. Anshuman did not come, but they are wasting millions of dollars of Indian taxpayer money. I'm just letting out some of the corruption scandals in this country. I quit another company, another organization, which invited me as a global president, which you see on my nameplate. They invited me to be a global president for mobility as a service, on which I am a bigger expert than Elon Musk and everyone else put together. I presented my first paper at Intelligent Transportation System World Congress in Japan in the year 2004, when I was working with Tata Consultancy Services. Next year, and something very important, because if that had happened, Delhi would not face this obnoxious, nauseating and shameful air pollution, more so in winter, but it stays throughout the year. What was that solution that I'm talking about? I was a key contributor to the National Urban Transport Policy, along with Dr. Sanjeev Lohia and Shaleen Kabra, IAS officers. Dr. Lohia is IT Delhi alumni and a good friend. He's presently advisor to World Bank. Mr. O.P. Agrawal, who probably Shubhra would know and many others know, he was heading WRI, World Resource Institute. Last I met him in Bengaluru, couple of months back, I reminded him that I made a 3 hours presentation in 2006 in which I said that Delhi should lead in multimodal transportation integration. So I was a visionary of multimodal transportation integration that time. Replacing every petrol diesel vehicle with electric vehicle, we all agreed, we were just having this conversation some time back, will only create more mess, create more problems than it will solve. The solution to Delhi pollution, which I gave in National Urban Transport Policy, is what is called think rail, use roads. So I quickly, because there's always a paucity of time, so this is just a teaser. There's lots more I need to share with you, which I'll do in subsequent sessions. Think rail, use roads essentially has 3 key components that it borrows from the railway system and also from the telecom and the airline system. So, just like, and also the electricity grid. So it is a very cross-pollination of ideas. Think rail, use roads. What does it mean? So when you think of railways, the 3 key things, if you are a good observer, you would notice is that railways have something called dedicated right-of-way network. So the railway network has underpasses and overbridges at every time it intersects with another grade. So whenever a road transport or a water river comes, then either it would have an overbridge or an underpass. So that it is a seamless, dedicated right-of-way network. There is no trespassing allowed, though in India we don't follow it much and that's why we have lots of accidents there. But railways is supposed to have that. The second important feature that railways have, which we need to borrow into the road network, is that it has interchanges, it has railway stations. So you enter the railway station from one end, then there are platforms where again you have overbridges and underpasses so that you can navigate to the particular platform in a very seamless, convenient, comfortable way. Similarly, for roadways, I suggested to Mr. O.P. Agrawal to Urban Development Ministry and put it in the National Urban Transport Policy along with the pictures and also told Mr. Sridharan about it, the Delhi Metro founder, that create motorway stations, create hub and spoke by which you identify a seamless network of dedicated right-of-way arterial corridors and create motorway stations at demand-responsive intervals just like you would do for railway stations. The moment you do that, your first mile, last mile connectivity problem completely goes away because you are not moving any heavy motor vehicle in the neighborhood space. Just as you would not allow the neighborhood kids to play football in your drawing room, similarly, neighborhoods are supposed to have the sanctity and integrity of walking and cycling and every other mode which maintains eye contact. So anything which IT Delhi trip, Dinesh Mohan and Geetam Tiwari told the world, but they forgot about it to implement it. What they told the world is that any vehicle that is light, that is silent, that is non-severing, if it moves at speed below 35 km per hour, then it doesn't sever walking and cycling. So now in your neighborhood, you have complete freedom because there are no motor vehicles there. All the motor vehicles are now in the motorway station, like bus depots. So if you need space, you create vertical stacks. That's the second point, that interchanges are very important for road system to eliminate traffic jams, to eliminate road accidents, to eliminate air pollution, because 80% of the air pollution comes from transportation related infrastructure and its usage. The third point of railways and telecom and airlines and electricity grid that we need to bring into road system, and something that we must thank Steve Jobs for. This particular touch screen that he gave the world. Steve Jobs was a spiritual person, and I like to quickly share this anecdote about him. That after Steve Jobs was thrown out of Apple, before I come back to this third point on what we need to bring from railways to roads, Steve Jobs, in his second innings, when he came back to Apple, he is meeting a developers conference, and a guy asks him a very stinging question. He says that, Mr. Jobs, you've been out of the job for nearly 7 years. You are not clued in, and you want some very radical, drastic changes. How do you plan to do that? It looks very difficult. So he basically challenged Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs kept his cool, and he gave a point that changed the world. And that point, if applied to everything else, changes everything else. What did Steve Jobs say? He said that do not approach problems from the supply side. He essentially said that create the graphic interface, create the communication interface, and he brought the keypad that was sitting below in the Nokia phone on the touch screen itself. And about Steve Jobs, which every aspiring entrepreneur should know, because he is the legend. He is the king of entrepreneurship and for innovation and design. So what Steve Jobs, people around him used to say is that he had such a good knack of reading minds that he could tell the team that if you plan to do something in 3 months, he would give them a target of 24 hours, and that never failed. So some of his, his followers and his fan club, they coined a term called reality distortion field. So what reality distortion field essentially means is something like a hypnosis. So let's say, if I quickly ask you a question, how many of you think that by October of 2025, that is before the next winter sets in, Delhi will not have unsafe, hazardous, toxic air pollution? How many of you think that it is possible? Please, quickly, we are running out of time. How many of you think that by next winter, Delhi will not have the shameful, obnoxious, nauseating, toxic, hazardous air pollution? None of you. None of you. Because we have been so much dumbed down, we've been so much brainwashed, we are so conditioned that something that affects each one of us, that every breath we take is poison. And you cannot buy, you cannot carry an oxygen cylinder because it's not practical. You cannot sit inside a room with air purifier, you'll get 10 other diseases anyway, even if you don't die from polluted air. So quickly, because I've been advised that we are running already very late because it's not a very well curated program. So the third point that I need to come to is that railways have a signaling system. Roads have traffic signals, which is 18th century technology sitting on 21st century infrastructure. We have digital public infrastructure. We have air traffic control, which navigates the paths of aircrafts, though they move in three-dimensional space, which has far more pathways than road space. Roads are in short supply because there is lots of encroachment. The carriageways are not uniform. And yet, we haven't yet thought, we haven't yet imagined, even in a country like India, which is the worst victim of traffic jams. My elder daughter missed her train, Shubhra, just 3 days back, coming from Ahmedabad to Delhi, though she left 1.5 hours. So this is not even about Bengaluru, this is about Ahmedabad. Next day she had to catch a flight which also was 2 hours late. And we want to become Viksit Bharat. There's a big question mark on our ability to keep our sanity checked. Forget about, IQ and innovation and creativity and many other brighter things. So the moment we bring land traffic control and the moment our trips start from motorway stations to motorway station, we can do what's called preordained trip routing. So what it essentially means is that we create, instead of chat GPT, we create mass VPT. So what mass VPT stands for, I'll just conclude on this note. Mass is mobility as a service. So you can do your own research. What is mobility as a service? It's a buzzword. Uber brought it in India. We are very grateful to them. But they messed it up badly. They think by bribing Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri and the new urban development minister, they can get away with spike pricing. They are in delusion, because I've already had discussions with ONDC Mobility. Nitin Nair, who heads ONDC Mobility, which is Open Network for Digital Commerce, that very soon we will come up with a super aggregator app. So irrespective of which app you book from, it will go through a middleware which will allocate the ridership to the vehicle which is nearest, irrespective of which vendor it is. So by creating this fuzzy logic, customers will be benefit from what I call mass VPT. So mass is mobility as a service, and VPT is variegated public transport. So like in housing, we have high income group, middle income group, low income group, business class, economy class. You have 7-star hotel, 5-star hotel, 3-star hotel, dhaba, whatever. Likewise, you will have platinum class, in which on a special occasion like your birthday of your mom, or on a marriage anniversary, you will get a Rolls Royce or an Audi or a whatever car you may fancy, or for that particular day. But for 90% of the trips, you only need a single seat. So we will do a hub and spoke by which you get door-to-door connectivity, where you may even get a good bicycle or an electric scooter. Or if you're elderly and if you are not medically fit to walk or cycle, you can hop on to what is called electric golf carts, like you see in AIMS campus. But they will be there in every neighborhood to give you connectivity to the nearest motorway station or to the nearest metro rail station. So just my last 30 seconds on a very important announcement that I would like to make. So after 2005-06, when I drafted the National Urban Transport Policy, I applied to TCS for internal entrepreneurship. I asked them for a 500 crore fund, because it's an infrastructure project, it needs big money. They said that our policy is that unless you're there for 3 to 4 years, you don't get entitled for internal funding. A year and a half later, I quit to set up 10 systems. 10 stands for transportation, E for energy, N for environment. One of my friends, who's a very successful entrepreneur in Pune, was the other co-director. We were doing very well. The Urban Development Ministry, OP Agrawal ji, he promised me that he will get me 25 lakh funds immediately from the Global Environment Facility Fund, which he was handling. And he did that. I was staying in Palam Vihar in Gurgaon, and he asked me to do a pilot project. Mr. Jaipal Reddy was the then Urban Development Minister. He was to be the chief guest. But due to several reasons, despite the fact that we had NDTV covering us, we had Hindustan Times, we had Times of India giving half a page coverage to the public consultation event that we did at Chancellor Club in Palam Vihar. And yet, due to policy reasons, our pilot could not take off. The policy problem was that the moment we were coming from Haryana to Delhi, we had to pay a 25 rupees toll. Now, world over, the practice is that intermediate public transport or public transport is waived off from toll. In India, it is the private vehicles which are exempted and the intermediate public transport, and that 25 rupees completely defeated our proposition, because we were creating a shuttle from Palam Vihar Vyapar Kendra to the nearest metro station, at that time Dwarka Sector 9. We went back to Haryana government, we went back to government ministry. Another problem was that we were using electric vehicle shuttle from Scooters India. There was no other, like today we have hundreds of players. That time there was no QR code. That time smartphones were not so ubiquitous. So if you are all game with it, we can create something bigger than Amazon, bigger than Google, bigger than Facebook. But that requires an ecosystem approach. And we can do here, right here at MERI College Startup. Thank you so much for the wonderful listening that you did. I could see, except for some gossiping at the back benches. And thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.